Some video games are built to answer a single question. Like, what if the simple acts of running and jumping were fun? What if you were transported to a fantasy world full of unforgiving yet satisfying challenges? What if video games were actually not fun at all? Well, the game I am covering today also has a central question. This game dares to ask, what if driving in a parking garage was actually an enjoyable experience? This is Parking Garage Rally Simulator, and if there has ever been a game that deserves more love, it's right here. This game is an absolute blast. It was developed by Wallaber Entertainment, who also developed Jellycar, and wow, that is a core memory. I played a lot of Jellycar when I got an iPod Touch as a kid, and it's so cool to see that the developer is still making games, especially ones like this. Parking Garage Rally Simulator sets out to evoke the feeling of a classic arcade racer with some modern sensibilities, and it does so perfectly. The visuals alone were enough to make me want to try the game. I love the Sega Saturn-like aesthetic, and I would love to see more games emulate this style. I'm saying this as someone who never even owned a Sega Saturn. I'm just a sucker for retro visuals. Now, there are plenty of visual options in the game if you want to customize the experience, but the default look was exactly what I wanted. Now, while this is a racing game, it is a rally racer rather than a traditional racing game, meaning that instead of racing against other cars in real time, you are actually racing against the other racers' times, which appear on the course as ghosts. I love this decision. Since you don't have to accommodate for several cars at once, the tracks can be designed to encourage precise movement and execution, and I love this. Precise tracks can only be good though if the controls allow for it, but fortunately, the controls in this game are both simple and extremely tight. Aside from steering the car, the only buttons to worry about are the gas, the brake, and the drift button. Drifting is essential in this game. It's similar to Mario Kart in that a longer drift results in a more powerful boost. However, this game builds upon the drift mechanic in a way that I have personally never seen before. If you start another drift before your boost ends, you can essentially stack another boost on top. You can chain these boosts throughout the track to reach ridiculous speeds that can be hard to manage, but successfully doing so will net some very quick times. The downside to quick speeds, like I alluded to, is that controlling the car at these high speeds can be a challenge. I don't think it's unfair or bad by any means, but there is certainly a touch of jank that is introduced as you reach the maximum speeds. Like I said, I don't think this negatively impacts the game. To me, it adds to the arcadey feel, and while I got frustrated in a couple of tracks as I tried to climb the leaderboards, it was not even close to being enough to deter me from playing. Speaking of the tracks, there are 8 of them that you can race with 3 different classes of cars. The tracks take place in different parking garages throughout the US. When you start a race, you will see 3 ghost cars, color-coded to be bronze, silver, and gold. To unlock the next track, you must at least beat the bronze time, but I never settle for less than gold, baby. Some of the gold times were tough to beat, but they never felt unfair or like they required 100% perfect driving. An aspect I love is that if you know a run isn't going well, you can restart the race very quickly. This game is so snappy and it does not waste your time. But when you're a god gamer like me, you're pretty much able to get gold on the first try for each course. Each track you unlock gets progressively more challenging, but the learning curve is pretty much perfect. You start off in a very simple garage, more so meant as a training course to familiarize yourself with the mechanics, but before you know it, you are racing through a parking garage with a power outage, or performing huge jumps and dodging snowplows. The courses somehow manage to have a nice sense of variety, even though they all take place in parking garages. They all feel very distinct from one another, and each is very fun to grind and get faster and faster times. Speaking of the grind for faster times, it is handled perfectly in this game. When you beat the gold time, the game automatically downloads ghost data of other players in the leaderboard who are just a bit faster than you. So when you start a race again, instead of the bronze, silver, and gold ghosts from before, you now see the ghosts of players at your level. It's an incredible system that makes replaying stages so rewarding as the difficulty level scales with your skill. Another thing I love about the ghost system is that you can choose which ghosts you want to challenge. If you want to challenge yourself against the best time in the world, go for it. And the best part is that you can challenge a bunch of ghosts at once, which results in an incredibly chaotic experience. I love it. Alongside the typical racing mode is endurance mode, and this mode emulates classic arcade racers in their purest form. When the race begins, a timer begins to count down. Every checkpoint you pass through adds a little bit of time to the timer, and the challenge is to see how many laps you can get before the timer hits 0. It's a solid mode that complements the traditional mode nicely. Personally, I gravitated more to the traditional racing mode as I felt that grinding my times down was more satisfying than grinding my lap numbers up, but it's still a great mode that is a welcome addition to the game. Now, the one strength I haven't touched on yet is the soundtrack, which was composed by the Holophonics. I gotta say, I love it. It perfectly accompanies the retro era that the game is emulating. It keeps the energy very high and just gives you a sense of joyfulness while you play. There are a couple of vocal tracks, and when those started playing during my races, I couldn't help but smile. On the first listen, I remember thinking that the vocal tracks were a bit on the cheesy side, and I definitely think there is some truth to that, but it works wonders, and by the fourth loop, I was singing along as I attempted run after run to grind my times down. The soundtrack evokes a similar feeling to the 3D Sonic games or to the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series, and that is about as big of a compliment as I can give here. Now, there is one aspect that I can't touch on in this video, and that's the multiplayer. There is an online multiplayer mode that lets you race in real time with other players in collisionless racing, and that sounds like a blast, but I have not been able to find any multiplayer matches since I got the game. So I can't really speak to how good that mode is, but given the quality of the rest of the game, I have no doubts that it would be a blast. At the end of the day, Parking Garage Rally Simulator is a modern, hidden gem that deserves way more love. It's polished, precise, and an absolute blast to play, and for just $9.99, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better deal. So do me a favor, buy this game. Not just because it deserves your support, but because I really want to play the multiplayer mode.